ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that audiences of General Hospital are becoming increasingly vocal, and increasingly exhausted, by what they perceive as the over-engineered control being exerted over a Rocco Falconeri's storyline. Once a supporting character with untapped emotional depth and a compelling family legacy. But this frustration isn't just about disliking where the story is going, it's about the loss of emotional authenticity. The feeling that a complex adolescent is being flattened into a tool to serve a broader agenda that disregards audience intelligence and emotional memory. Including the unethical circumstances surrounding Rocco's conception and kidnapping, Britt has re-entered the scene under a cloud of rebranding. She is no longer portrayed as the damaged antihero seeking redemption. Now, she's being subtly repackaged as someone emotionally vital to Rocco's present and future. But that shift is happening so rapidly, and so aggressively, that many longtime fans feel emotionally alienated. When Rocco refers to Britt as a second mother, it doesn't land as a touching moment of reconciliation, it feels like narrative coercion. This is where the core of the problem lies. The show appears to be exerting tight control over how viewers are expected to interpret Rocco's reactions and emotions. His supposed obsession with understanding his origins is being used as justification for glossing over deeply traumatic events. Viewers are being asked to not only accept this psychological shift from Rocco without resistance, but to embrace it as a sign of emotional maturity. But many see it differently. To them, it's less a story of healing and more a story of rewriting history, minimizing past crimes and manipulating a young character's confusion for the sake of rehabilitating someone like Britt, who hasn't had to truly reckon with the consequences of her past actions. Fans aren't rejecting the idea that Rocco would struggle with identity, abandonment, or even complicated affection towards someone like Britt. Those are real, rich emotional territories. What they're rejecting is the speed and tone of how this is unfolding. There's a difference between portraying a teenager's messy, conflicted emotional evolution and orchestrating a narrative where those conflicts are used as vehicles for other characters' redemption arcs. Rocco is being written less as a boy trying to make sense of his world and more as a prop, one whose reactions are overly simplified and framed to elicit sympathy for characters who, in the eyes of many viewers, haven't earned it. The frustration intensifies when viewers consider the broader emotional context of Rocco's life. Lulu, his biological mother, is still comatose. Dante, his father, is emotionally distant and inconsistently involved. Rocco's upbringing has been one of emotional instability, grief, and fragmented support systems. And now, instead of exploring the natural consequences of such a background, anger, confusion, withdrawal, the show is pushing Rocco toward premature emotional conclusions. He doesn't resist Britt. He doesn't question the ethics of her past. He calls her a second mother, seemingly without trauma, without conflict, and certainly without any meaningful processing on screen. This is not character development, it's emotional manipulation disguised as storytelling. The return of Britt, which should have been a fascinating and controversial turning point, has instead become the symbol of a larger narrative problem. Fans aren't inherently opposed to her being brought back into the fold. What they're resisting is the way her return is steamrolling over unresolved trauma that Rocco, of all people, should be deeply affected by. Her reappearance should have prompted confusion, resistance, maybe even confrontation from Rocco. Instead, it's as if the writers are skipping chapters in favor of a neat, sanitized emotional payoff that simply doesn't ring true for longtime viewers. This growing disconnect between narrative and audience is being felt in every corner of the fan community. Online forums, comment sections, and social media threads are filled with variations of the same message: we don't buy it. Fans are tired of being told how to feel. They're tired of the emotional shorthand that demands they forget past crimes and trauma in order to cheer for a character's return. They're tired of watching complex emotional journeys like Rocco's be reduced to predictable redemption devices for legacy characters. Most of all, they're tired of having their intelligence underestimated. There's a word that keeps surfacing in these conversations: inauthentic. That's what this storyline feels like to many. Inauthentic to Rocco's experience. Inauthentic to the show's emotional legacy. Inauthentic to how real people react to betrayal, manipulation, and unresolved grief. The obsession that now surrounds Rocco's storyline, the obsessive attempt to control his reactions, to funnel his emotions toward specific outcomes, has become the very thing undermining the story. What could have been a bold, risky, and emotionally honest arc about identity, forgiveness, and trauma is being suffocated by narrative convenience. Some viewers have suggested that this entire direction feels like damage control, an attempt to salvage a controversial character like Britt without putting in the emotional groundwork. Others believe it's part of a larger pattern within General Hospital, where moral complexity is often sacrificed for neat resolutions and fan service. Either way, the reaction is loud, sustained, and increasingly hostile. What was meant to be a triumphant return for Britt is now being met with skepticism, not because fans dislike her, but because the story is asking them to forget too much and feel too little. If the writers hope to regain trust, they will need to step back from this obsession with steering emotional outcomes and start honoring the messy, unresolved, and contradictory feelings that characters like Rocco would realistically experience. He doesn't need to be a perfect symbol of understanding. He needs to be real. And real teenagers don't accept their kidnappers as mother figures without a fight. Real healing doesn't come without discomfort. And real stories don't need to control every beat, they need to breathe. Until then, the audience's growing dissatisfaction will only deepen. Because when a show like General Hospital, beloved for its emotional truth and complexity, begins to feel like it's rewriting pain for the sake of convenience, the audience won't simply be frustrated, they'll be heartbroken. And they will speak out, as they are now, not because they've stopped caring, but because they care too much to watch it all unravel this way. A powerful shift is underway in General Hospital. And at the heart of it is Britt's highly anticipated return to Port Charles, a return that is doing far more than just reigniting old relationships. It is actively disrupting the fragile emotional architecture surrounding Rocco Falconeri, pushing his story to the forefront in a way that feels both volatile and transformative. As Britt moves closer to re-entering the canvas, what was once a slow-burning subplot in Rocco's arc has ignited into one of the most emotionally charged narratives on the show. And fans can feel the storm coming. This isn't simply a reunion. It's a catalyst. A narrative explosion. A reckoning long overdue. Rocco, already a character caught in emotional limbo, between the memory of a mother in a coma, a father distant with guilt, and a life shaped by shadows, now finds himself the center of a plotline that's accelerating fast. Britt's return is dragging his past into the present, cracking open old wounds that were never properly treated, and forcing him to face questions about who he is, where he came from, and what it means to belong. Her reappearance is not subtle. It's seismic. And the ripple effects are destabilizing everything Rocco thought he understood about himself and those around him. What makes this moment so critical, and so dangerous, is that Rocco's psychological state was already beginning to shift before Britt's name resurfaced. His curiosity about his origins had taken on an obsessive edge. His thoughts about identity and family were beginning to stray into morally gray territory. And now, as the woman who once participated in his kidnapping makes her return, those thoughts are no longer theoretical, they are being weaponized by the narrative. The emotional adjustment occurring in Rocco is not gentle. It is sharp, abrupt, and calculated. It is one of the clearest signs yet that General Hospital is deliberately destabilizing this character to reflect the chaos of his lineage and the trauma of his past. Just as Britt walks back into the frame. But it's not just Rocco who is affected. His evolving feelings toward Britt are forcing every other character in his orbit to adjust, reevaluate, and react. Dante, who once fought to protect his son from Britt's influence, now finds himself struggling with how to define redemption for someone who nearly destroyed his family. Olivia watches with growing concern as her son forms emotional attachments that defy logic and history. And even those who once supported Britt's journey toward rehabilitation are beginning to ask, has too much been forgotten too quickly? Rocco, in many ways, is being written as a mirror. His emotional journey reflects the larger discomfort simmering in Port Charles, the question of what redemption really looks like, and who gets to claim it. If Rocco can forgive Britt, if he can rewrite his own trauma to include her in a maternal role, then what does that say about justice? About memory? About pain? The answer, so far, is unclear, but the implications are explosive. Fans are already responding in real time. Social media is flooded with debates, many of which hinge on the emotional logic of Rocco's storyline. Some viewers sympathize with his desire for connection, seeing his embrace of Britt as a desperate attempt to fill the void left by Lulu's absence. Others argue that his sudden shift in affection is being engineered too quickly, too conveniently, to serve a broader narrative adjustment that doesn't feel emotionally honest. And Britt's role in all of this? She has become the match that lit the fuse. Her journey back to Port Charles isn't just a comeback, it's a disruption. It's dragging the narrative into dangerous territory, where trauma is reframed as opportunity and obsession masquerades as healing. And as Rocco stands at the center of this emotional storm, what happens next could reshape not only his future but the moral compass of the entire show. This is no longer a simple character return. It is a restructuring of emotional alliances, of family definitions, of memory and morality. And as it unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear, the storylines involving Britt and Rocco are not separate, they are colliding. Violently and unapologetically. This is a new era of General Hospital, where redemption comes at a cost, and where the line between healing and rewriting the past grows ever thinner. Whatever happens next, one thing is certain, this isn't just a storyline shift. It's a detonation. And no one, least of all Rocco, will come out untouched. Rocco is quickly becoming one of the most polarizing figures in General Hospital's current landscape. And not because of anything traditionally villainous or scandalous, but because of how his sudden emotional shift is actively erasing the foundational roles of Lulu and Dante. The two people who gave him structure, safety, and unconditional love. Fans are watching with increasing disbelief as Rocco appears to minimize, or worse, discard entirely, the sacrifices and stability provided by his mother and father. In doing so, the show has veered into what many are calling an unhinged storyline direction. One that doesn't just feel emotionally dissonant, but deliberately provocative in all the wrong ways. What's emerging isn't just a plot twist, it's an obsession. A disturbing new rewriting of character identity, and it's sending ripples through the fandom that are impossible to ignore. For years, Lulu and Dante represented a grounding presence in Rocco's life. Lulu's fierce love and Dante's complex, but deeply loyal fatherhood helped shape Rocco into more than just a supporting teen. He was a symbol of legacy, resilience, and emotional continuity. So when the current arc began to paint Rocco as emotionally detached from his parents, particularly Lulu, who remains in a coma, fans were initially patient, assuming the story would eventually circle back to unresolved grief or emotional confusion. But instead of reckoning with that pain, the show has made a baffling pivot. Rocco is now aligning emotionally with Britt, the woman once complicit in his traumatic origins, while all but disregarding the two people who actually raised him. This isn't subtle. Rocco isn't shown grappling with guilt or internal conflict, he's moving forward with a strange and jarring clarity. Openly referring to Britt as a maternal figure and appearing to rewrite his own history in real time. Lulu's absence isn't just mourned, it's almost erased. Dante's presence is acknowledged, but not respected. It's as if the writers have made an editorial decision to unhook Rocco from the emotional truths that defined his earliest years and instead bolt him to a new, more chaotic identity built around reinvention and misplaced affection. What's most disturbing for longtime viewers is how this transformation seems to be part of a larger, deliberate narrative strategy. The storyline is no longer focused on what Rocco is feeling, it's focused on what the audience is supposed to accept. And what they're being asked to accept is this: that Britt, despite her past crimes, is now not only welcome in Rocco's life, but possibly replacing Lulu in his emotional hierarchy. That kind of suggestion isn't just narratively jarring, it's emotionally offensive to those who remember how fiercely Lulu fought to have and protect Rocco. And how deeply Dante's character was shaped by his role as Rocco's father. It's a slap to the history the show spent years building. And yet, It's more than just character revision, it's becoming an obsession. Rocco's emotional shift is being written not as a journey, but as a done deal. The kind of obsessive reframing we're seeing in this storyline, where identity, trauma, and relationships are rapidly restructured without nuance, feels more like psychological projection than development. Rocco isn't reacting like a teenager lost in grief. He's reacting like someone under emotional influence, being steered toward conclusions that benefit plot rather than personal truth. In many ways, this is not just a misstep, it's a complete reconfiguration of what General Hospital has stood for when it comes to legacy characters and intergenerational dynamics. The fans have noticed. The backlash is growing. Forums, social media groups, and comment sections are lighting up with viewers questioning not only the logic of the storyline, but the show's motives. Many have labeled the current arc a betrayal of Lulu and Dante, characters who have been iconic not only for their romance but for the moral foundation they brought to the show. The emotional displacement happening in Rocco isn't just rewriting his story, it's threatening to tarnish theirs as well. What's most haunting is how eerily silent the show seems to be on this shift. There's no real effort being made to acknowledge the erasure, no scenes of Rocco questioning his own reactions, no indication that this is a temporary phase of emotional confusion. Instead, the narrative seems to be embracing this new identity with full force, allowing Rocco's rewritten loyalty to Britt to stand as a strange new truth, one that feels more like obsession than redemption. More like narrative control than honest evolution. And this is why fans feel not just disappointed, but deeply unsettled. This isn't about disliking Britt or fearing change. It's about watching a beloved character spiral into a version of himself that seems fundamentally disconnected from his emotional roots. It's about realizing that the show is now prioritizing shock over soul, revision over reckoning, and obsession over authenticity. Rocco's arc was once filled with potential. He could have been the anchor in a storyline about loss, identity, and the complications of legacy. But instead, he's becoming the symbol of a dangerous trend in storytelling, where the past is erased in favor of a cleaner, faster future. Where emotional history is not honored, but overwritten. And where obsession, whether with reinvention, redemption, or controversy, takes precedence over coherence. This storyline isn't just a change. It's a rupture. A clear and growing divide between the show's past and its present. And unless General Hospital course corrects soon, it may find that the obsession it has created is no longer just inside the story, it's in the audience, too. Watching. Waiting. And no longer willing to stay silent. Liesl and Britt are stepping back into General Hospital with more than just emotional baggage. They are bringing with them a wave of psychological control that is rapidly unraveling the lives of those around them. Their return is not gentle, not redemptive in the traditional sense, but strategic, forceful, and calculated. What began as a potential arc of healing and reunion has now transformed into a story of influence, manipulation, and emotional pressure. At the center of this storm is Rocco Falconeri. A teenager already struggling with identity, abandonment, and loss, who is now being pushed into impossible choices that are not his own, but rather shaped by the tightening grip of Liesl and Britt's renewed presence. And in this new chapter, one thing is clear, the storyline is spinning out of control. And the emotional cost is mounting. Liesl, ever the force of ironclad loyalty masked as maternal protection, has made it her mission to reshape the narrative around Britt's return. She's not merely asking for forgiveness, she's demanding acceptance, and she's pulling every string within Port Charles to make sure it happens. Those who question Britt's place, or dare to bring up her past misdeeds, are quietly shut out, silenced, or coerced into complicity. And as Liesl sharpens her influence, it's not just the adults who are being caught in her web, it's Rocco, a boy barely able to navigate his own adolescence, now forced to reconcile feelings he was never ready to confront. Britt, meanwhile, isn't playing the role of the humbled, remorseful woman seeking slow redemption. She's stepping in with a strange boldness, assuming an emotional authority in Rocco's life that many viewers find deeply unsettling. She positions herself close to him, physically, emotionally, symbolically, as if the past has been rewritten and she now belongs there. And while on the surface it may look like reconnection or healing, beneath it lies a subtler truth. This is control disguised as care. And for Rocco, that control is becoming suffocating. The real tragedy is that Rocco's autonomy, his right to process, to question, to grieve, is being stripped away under the pretense of family reunion. Rather than being allowed the space to explore what Britt's return means to him, he's being emotionally maneuvered into acceptance. He's being told, not asked, how to feel. The natural confusion and resistance that should accompany a reappearance like Britt's has been replaced with forced emotional alignment. Rocco is expected to embrace a woman who once played a part in one of the darkest chapters of his life, and worse, he's expected to do so without hesitation or complexity. This shift has not gone unnoticed by fans. Many are voicing frustration over how quickly the show seems to be rewriting Rocco's emotional journey. And how deeply out of character it feels for a teenager to so easily discard the roles of Lulu and Dante, two foundational figures in his life, in favor of a narrative that places Britt at the center. It's not just unearned. It's unsettling. Rocco calling Britt a maternal figure, or showing deference to Liesel's moral authority, feels more like a product of manipulation than natural growth. And it's placing him in an emotional minefield he's not equipped to handle. What's worse is the growing sense that this isn't a temporary narrative twist, but part of a broader, more troubling adjustment. The story isn't just about Britt returning. It's about reshaping memory, blurring the lines of accountability, and using emotional pressure to redefine truth. Liesel and Britt, intentionally or not, are creating an atmosphere where Rocco's past is being edited in real time. Lulu's love, Dante's guidance, all of it is being pushed aside to make room for a cleaner, more convenient version of family. But in doing so, they are pushing Rocco to the edge of psychological collapse. And that's the ticking time bomb no one seems willing to address. Rocco is being pulled in too many directions. He's being told to forgive, to forget, to adapt, and he's doing so without the support systems he once had. As Liesel tightens her grip and Britt steps into a role she hasn't truly earned, Rocco is being forced to silence his own doubts. His anger, his confusion. But emotions don't disappear. They bury themselves. They fester. And when they resurface, because they won't be quiet. They will explode. This is no longer a story about a teen coming of age. This is a slow, psychological burn turning into an inferno. The control being exercised over Rocco is not nurturing, it's parasitic. And the longer it continues unchecked, the more devastating the fallout will be. Port Charles is not witnessing a healing, it's witnessing the systematic breakdown of a boy who was never allowed to heal in the first place. And when Rocco realizes that the choices he thought were his were never really his to begin with, when he understands that his grief, his identity, his voice were rewritten to serve someone else's narrative, the backlash will be seismic. Because no one emerges from that kind of betrayal unchanged. Liesel and Britt may believe they are restoring family. They may believe their actions are justified. But in doing so, they are playing with the emotional foundation of someone still trying to define who he is. And the obsession with control, no matter how well-intentioned, is becoming the story itself. A story not of reunion, but of repression. Not of forgiveness, but of forced surrender. And when it finally explodes, General Hospital will never be the same.